I think it's safe to say I wasn't expecting that for several reasons. So, let's digest 73 yards. Hello, my name's Chris, what's yours, and welcome back to my channel, where alongside doing a marathon of Doctor Who from the very beginning, I also take time to give my immediate thoughts on new Doctor Who episodes when they air. Last night, early hours of this morning, was 73 Yards, episode 4 of season 1, and for how early it is in the season, and I get because of shooters' availability that they filmed this one first, I think, of the block because he was busy filming Sex Education. But regardless, the idea of doing a Dr. Light episode this early on in the Doctor's era shows an incredible amount of confidence, a heck of a lot of confidence in Millie Gibson. I knew going in that it was going to be Dr. Light. I think that was no secret. That wasn't one of the things I didn't expect. What I didn't expect was how the episode progressed, and I'm not one of those people that actively seeks filming photos, set reports. Sometimes I will inevitably come across spoilers. That's the nature of fandom. They don't concern me too much. I don't feel like the nature of a spoiler, the name of it is that it's spoiled the episode. I never feel like a spoiler has spoiled an episode for me, but I do like to not actively seek them out, because then I feel like, what's the point? Just wait for the episode. So I did know about Roger Ap Gwilliam appearing in this series. I didn't expect him to show up here until I saw watching the episode was no surprise. Obviously, he was in the cast list, so I knew he was going to show up, but I didn't know he was going to show up in episode 4, Dr. Light, 73 Yards, until that cast list came out. I think what I thought this episode was going to be, and these words were used to sell it, which was Welsh folk horror. So I thought once the Doctor had vanished, we were going to be in that pub, and that pub was going to come under siege from whatever was menacing Ruby. And I was all for that, because the way the episode starts, it's so full of atmosphere, and the locals in the pub are all so great. I would have happily spent the rest of the episode watching them. That it then didn't transpire like that didn't disappoint me. It sort of jolted me. And the left turn it takes by Ruby going back home was first of all like, I thought we were going to be in that pub for the duration. We're not. And then you kind of settle into the fact that, okay, she's going to be at home now. Units are going to step in. And then it takes another left turn. And then we sort of do the Russell borrowing from his own Years and Years series, where we sort of progress every so often. And I didn't expect that either. So every time I got comfortable with this episode, it didn't let me, and that is for me a huge positive. I don't like when I get comfortable. That's fine, because sometimes, you know, it can still progress in a really strong way if everything's put together very well. And I think it would have been, like, I still maintain an episode set in the pub with all of those locals as sort of like a horror story would work incredibly well. That's not to say that I didn't enjoy the directions this episode took. Now, what I thought was, and I have to say that, and I am repeating myself to regular viewers of the channel, I think Russell T Davies is a visionary when it comes to making television. I don't always get on with his specific vision of Doctor Who, and that was true of his first era. So I always sort of like tread this fine line. I am very careful to point out that even though I don't always agree with his vision of Doctor Who, I will never denigrate how the guy can write, obviously. And I would say that 73 Yards runs a very close second to Midnight for my favourite ever Russell T Davies Doctor Who script. And that's a lovely feeling. Like, the unease of a new era, the unease of a new Doctor, the unease of a new paradigm of the show in its infancy was sort of like, I guess, set at ease a little bit by Boom. But Boom was written by Stephen Moffat. So to have 73 Yards come along sort of this early on, the variety on show so far, from Church on Ruby Road, Space Babies, Devil's Cord, Boom, and 73 Yards, it does give me comfort that the reduced episode count doesn't mean that we're skimping on variety. And when Russell T Davies writes scripts like Midnight, like 73 Yards, that's sort of something I'm fully on board with. I didn't watch 73 Yards and think, oh, go back to the pub. I didn't watch 73 Yards and think, oh, go back to Wales. I didn't watch 73 Yards and think, oh, go back 10 years. Do you know what I mean? I watched it and it was surprising to me, but it didn't feel like it was jumping the shark at any point. And that's something I can feel sometimes. The changes felt very justified. Now, I understand why some people might have some issues with it when it comes to the fact that it leaves us with more questions than answers. There are certain things that we're just expected to take at face value. My partner had a problem with, she was watching it and didn't like how we don't know what the woman said, old Ruby. We don't know what sort of supernatural powers she had to make people leg it. And it isn't just set up as like people that know Ruby would then be frightened of her. Like, trained soldiers who've never met Ruby before also react in the same way. So I get that because it leaves us with more questions than answers. I get that that's it could be a stumbling block for some people. But the way I sort of was watching it, knowing that we don't know everything about Ruby yet, and knowing that episode 7 is called The Legend of Ruby Sunday, which admittedly isn't knowledge that every viewer will have, I am confident that we will get some explanation. We'll sort of like circle back to it. However, even if we do not, that I think will be a failing and a slight disappointment for me of the series as a whole. What I don't think it will do is negate my enjoyment of 73 Yards, because sometimes the questions are what's unsettling, and sometimes answers are unsatisfying. So, for example, again, to bring Midnight into the equation, if you watch Midnight, you don't really know the nature of that creature, and the episode kind of needs you to not know for it to work. Like, there's also logistical questions about Midnight that are sort of like, they could be a stumbling block. So, for example, by the stewardess sucking the Sky and the creature possessing her out into the extonic radiation again, defeats it, but it was living out there, so what's to stop it just sort of like repossessing somebody else in the carriage? You don't really stop to think about that, because Midnight has been so good and such a ride that it's a strong piece of work. And I think the same is true of 73 Yards. I did ask those questions. I found that asking them wasn't because I was like, well, that's stupid, why this? I found myself asking, I wonder why. And I think, therefore, that means the episode was a success for me. It sort of hooked me in. And I do enjoy how we're not having a series of Doctor Who that is just playing the hits, because, yeah, okay, we have episodes sometimes that are, we have a Dr. Light episode regularly, we have Doctor Who episodes that go for a little bit more creepy and unsettling. But they always do it in a sort of like individual way, and they have their own identity, and I think 73 Yards is also one of those. I can't think of another episode like 73 Yards. The imagery is already sort of like unsettling, and I found that very integral to enjoying the story. So regardless of who the woman was, and I thought it was fairly guessable, given Doctor Who's a show about time travel, that it was going to be an older Ruby. But the journey along the way of like the always being ever so semper distans is a great concept. That worked. It was always like ever so slightly unsettling. That sort of thing that's in the corner of your eye that Doctor Who can play on sometimes. Something where you can't quite see everything, which is also true of the episode as well. We don't quite know the full nature of what happened. Like, it stays with you. The scariest part of the episode for me was when Kate Stewart's face changed after hearing what the woman said. Played impeccably by Gemma Redgrave. But even as just sort of like an idea, it works so well because Kate Stewart is a familiar character. And to have her react like that it does more to raise the stakes than anything else up until that point. Even like jump scares and what have you. And even just the unsettling imagery of the old lady continuously being 73 yards away. When Kate Stewart's face changes and the way she looks at Ruby, which is sort of like the same as when Carla goes past in the taxi as well, is so very, very effective. And Gemma Redgrave's like excellent. I'm so glad that Kate Stewart continues to be a recurring presence. And behind all of that, as well as Kate Stewart reacting the way she does, the fact that you think Unit are in now and maybe will be there continually for the rest of the episode. They even tease the sort of thing like, oh, you could take us to the TARDIS and all of that. To have that just one scene and for them to react exactly the same way, and for the whole thing to sort of like defeat Unit and Ruby gets abandoned again, that raises the stakes as well. I mean, I think it's conveyed best in the change in Kate's face, but still, if it isn't for you, you've still got the idea of all of these psychically trained soldiers still legging it, and it serves to make Ruby feel incredibly alone throughout her entire life, because the episode then spans her entire life. I quite like that there are still Bird and Blend tea shops in 2046, and this spanning Ruby's life is a good exercise in us getting to know Ruby. What's the companion like without the Doctor? And I really like how they touch on the fact that Ruby barely knows the Doctor. So the fact that she goes home and gets on with her life is slightly... It's already more plausible than, let's say, if it had happened with Rose halfway through Series 2. That's why Parting of the Ways works so well. Rose can't go back to her own life and she tries to get back to the Doctor. So it's not any essence of weakness on Ruby's part that she just sort of like gives up and goes home that quickly. It makes sense. And this episode does not portray Ruby as weak in the slightest, actually. Standing up to... and I guess she's using the resources at hand, but again, if I've got like one real like drawback of this episode, I was under the impression that that when people approached the old woman and they legged it, it was because she'd said something about Ruby, and they were avoiding Ruby, so that Ruby would then think that it would make, because Unit didn't disband, or at least I don't think so, unless they actually mention that. So like, why? I know she's using the tools at her advantage, but why would she assume that Roger Ap Gwilliam would then resign after speaking to the old lady? Surely he'd just sack Ruby and never want to be around her. But then I guess like it's part of taking a gamble, isn't it? And I really think that despite that one thing where that's the only bit that made me go, huh, okay, it was still really quite something to see Ruby stand up and remember everything that had been said, like for her 20 years previously, and go and save the world. That landed for me. Now that we've seen Ruby live a full life without the Doctor coming back at the end, or like obviously, and then when you sort of like start the timeline again, it's a relief. Like it's such a relief seeing the Doctor back again. And bearing in mind, he's a new Doctor still at this point. It's not like a Doctor we've acutely bonded with being robbed from us and then coming back, which is always a huge relief. This is a new Doctor, and the fact that it works as well as it does isn't just a testament to how I think Ncuti Gatwa is approaching the role. I might have said before, with each of these videos, he'll overtake another Doctor in my favourites list. This one not so much because he's barely in it. But not only is the fact that this all works in this episode a testament to him, it's a testament to Millie Gibson. And if this episode is anybody's, it is obviously hers. And my God, I've said before in every video covering new episodes that I think she's incredible. And even as good as I already thought she was, I don't think I was ready for how good she was in this episode. And it's down to how good she is that this episode works as well as it is. Yeah, it's my favourite After Midnight, second favourite Russell T Davies script for Doctor Who. It's written very well, but that would be nothing. That would count for very, very little if Millie Gibson wasn't as good as she was. And she is probably at the moment, and I'm only saying this after this episode because we've seen more of her than Ncuti, she is this new era's MVP. And what's even more impressive is that she was 18 when she filmed this episode. Now, I'm not saying that like she looked 40 when she played Ruby at 40, but I still believed the progression. She led the whole episode in a way that somebody 18 years old, it's not that they shouldn't be able to, but it's not that you would expect them to be able to that adeptly. And so I'm getting like a great deal of satisfaction watching this new series because of how good Ncuti is, because of how good Millie is, and because of how good they are together. And in this episode, I think it was the most I've ever sort of like marvelled at how good either of them were, and I have done that. But this was the most. I think it was an absolutely fantastic showcase for Millie. And if Ncuti is, slowly but steadily working his way up my favourite Doctors list, then so too is Millie in my favourite companions list. I think Ruby Sunday is an excellent character, but that's mostly down to Millie Gibson, more so than it is down to Russell T Davies, who created Ruby Sunday. And obviously there's this whole mystery box tied in with Ruby Sunday. So how I think of her as a character could change pending developments of this season. But what won't change, unless she massively drops the ball later on, which let's face it is unlikely, is how good I think Millie Gibson is as Ruby Sunday. And because the thread of this series seems to be Ruby Sunday, I'm actively excited for where it's going, more so after this episode. And if you've sort of like regularly followed my thoughts and feelings about this new era, while I've been, cautiously optimistic, I think it was 73 yards watching it last night or this morning that actually did I breathe a sigh of relief, or did I? It was either breathing a sigh of relief or it was letting go of that caution and actually becoming, I guess, the word people use is hyped. I am fully on board now, and I want to know where this season goes. Now, I don't necessarily think that it's worth trying to work out the legend of Ruby Sunday and what the mystery is, because one of my other big passions is impossible crime fiction, where it's all about the puzzle of a locked room and things like that. But they adhere to a thing called fair play, where all the clues to work it out are given to you. And in the past, with things like Bad Wolf, Torchwood, they're good arcs in terms of like they make you sit up and because you hear the word again and they're intriguing. And it's the same with the snow. You go, oh, the snow. they don't necessarily play by fair play. Because even if they did, and even sometimes you'll flash back to one line from episode 3, it's like, oh, that was a clue. But this is make-believe and science fiction and now fantasy, and supernatural, that they don't play by the rules of physics. So I've long given up trying to piece together and work out. All you can do is speculate and might be right. I don't think you can actually look at clues and work out what's going on. So I've given up trying to do that. And in much the same way that 73 yards leaves us with more questions than answers, and that didn't bother me, because sometimes the joy is in asking the questions before getting the answers. I'm fine with not knowing where this series is going. I'm fine with sort of like letting it unfold before me. Do reserve the right to take issue with the explanation if I don't think it's satisfactory. But what I know now from 73 yards is that we are in capable hands. Ncuti Gatwa and Millie Gibson are leading the show like incredibly well, and Russell T Davies clearly has an idea of what he wants this new era of Doctor Who to be like. Sometimes I haven't cared for it. Devil's Cord, Giggle, Church on Ruby Road, and then other times 73 yards, I really have enjoyed what he's done, and so I don't think I can claim that this episode let me down in any way, despite not giving me all of the answers. It entertained me enough that I actually came away from it not feeling like I need them just yet. And like I said earlier on, if those answers don't come at all in this series, yes, I will be disappointed. But like I said earlier in this video, I would consider that a failing of this series as a whole and not of this episode. Because I think this episode was, I don't know how long it was, 45, 50 minutes? I think it was, let's go with 50. I think it was 50 minutes of excellent Doctor Who. As ever, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed watching me digest 73 yards and talk through my immediate thoughts, then you know how YouTube works. Please do give it a like and share it around. And join us for the marathon of Doctor Who from the very beginning. All are welcome. And what did you think of 73 yards? Did you think it was one of Russell T Davies' strongest scripts for Doctor Who? Or did you think that it was an absolute mess? Were you upset that it wasn't just a horror movie set in that pub, and were you upset that it jumped however long it did, 60 years, and were you upset that it leaves you with more questions than answers? Let me know in the comments below, and I will see you back here next week for digesting Dot and Bubble. And in the meantime, we will be continuing season 8, John Pertwee's second year in the role for the Doctor Who marathon. So, if you don't want to miss any of those, hit the subscribe button, clang the cloister bell, and I'll see you next week.